Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom. How y'all doing, everybody? Welcome back to Rise and Scripts, man. We are back at it today. I got breath to breathe, baby. Breath to breathe, so I have all I need to succeed. So we're going to go ahead and read. Go ahead and get our read on today. We are back at it in the Book of Jasher. We're on chapter 12. We're on chapter 12 in the Book of Jasher. We're going to read 12, 13, and 14 today. They're both, it shouldn't be long. It's like 3-4 pages. 3-4 pages. 3-4 pages. But we're gonna see what it is and what it ain't, what we can and what we can't, and the do's and the don'ts that have been left behind by the Most High and the writers to give us the guidelines and to give us the map to being upright and righteous, and not the map, also the map to being wicked, so we can see which place goes where. But before that, let's give some reverence to the Most High God. Let's blow up the trumpet, man, so we can be heard, so we can be remembered, so he can know we trying to call him. Man, sound great. It was slacking this morning, but hey, it is what it is. We left off in chapter 12 last time. There was a lot of stuff going on. Abram is in the building right now, man. That boy Abram. Lamech's son. Is it Lamech? Terah's son. And King Nimrod wanted to kill Abram because of the signs that was in the stars the day that Abram was born. And man, when they thought that he had Abram in his hand, man, he bashed Abram. He bashed that baby on the ground. Baby. But it wasn't Abram. Abram lived. Terah had fooled the king and sent Abram to the cave with his mother. And now Abram is older, and Abram has recognized that his father is worshiping idols made of wood and stone that he made by his own hand. And Abram is destroyed the idols and blamed it on one of the biggest gods. And then they took the matter to the King Nimrod, and Abram has brought up the same matter. Why do y'all serve these things that cannot hear, cannot see, cannot reach his hand for it to help you, that cannot talk, that you cannot pray to, that cannot eat food? Why do you serve these things? And people is getting mad because Abram is upsetting the balance of things, or the balance in the way they do things. So chapter 12 is Abram. Shalom, Blake. Abram flees Nimrod, and he gonna have to flee Nimrod the same way David fled Saul. Appreciate the comment, Blake. Thank you. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Tell your people, man. Shalom out here reading, man. We're gonna read. We're gonna read. We're trying to learn something. The do's and the don'ts, the can and the can'ts, and the is and the ain'ts. Chapter 12. And when the king heard the words of Abram, he ordered him to be put into prison. And Abram was 10 days in prison. And at the end of those days, the king ordered that all the kings, princes, and governors of different provinces and sages should come before him. And they sat before him. And Abram was still in the house of confinement. And the king said to the princes and sages, "Have you heard what Abram, the son of Terah, has done to his father? And thus has he done to him. And I ordered him to be brought before me, and thus has he spoken. His heart did not misgive him, and neither did he stir in my presence. And behold, now he is confined in the prison. And therefore, decide what judgment is due to this man who reviled the king, who spoke and did all the things that you heard. And they all answered the king, saying, the man who revileth the king should be hanged upon a tree. But having done all these things that he said, and having despised our gods, he must therefore be burned to death. For this is the law in this matter. Trying to burn that barbecue Abram. If it pleaseth the king to do this, let him order his servant to kindle the fire both night and day in thy brick furnace, and then we will cast this man into it. And the king did so, and he commanded his servants that they should prepare a fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace that is in Kasdim. And the king ordered them to take Abram from prison and bring him out to be burned. And all the king's servants, princes, lords, governors, and judges, and all the inhabitants of the land, about 900,000 men, stood opposite the furnace to see Abram. Pooh, man, they was coming out there like they was coming to see a damn concert. And Abram was the one. And all the women and little ones crowded upon the roof and towers to see what was doing with Abram. And they all stood together at the distance. And there was not a man left that did not come on the day to behold the scene. And when Abram was come, the conjurers of the king and the sages saw Abram, and they cried out to the king, saying, our sovereign Lord, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars which we declared to the king now 50 years since. And behold, now his father was also transgressed thy commands, and mocked thee by bringing thee another child, which thou didst kill. And when the king heard their words, he was exceedingly wroth, and he ordered Terah to be brought before him. And the king said, hast thou heard what the conjurers have spoken? Now tell me truly, how didst thou? And if thou shalt speak truth, thou shalt be acquitted. And seeing that the king's anger was so much kindled, Terah said to the king, my lord and king, thou hast heard the truth, and what the sages have spoken is right. And the king said, how couldst thou do this thing to transgress my order, and to give me a child that thou didst not beget, and to take value for him? And Terah answered the king, because my tender feelings were excited for my son at that time. And I took my son of my handmaid, and I brought him to the king. And the king said, who advised thee to this? Tell me, do not hide aught from me, and then thou shalt not die. And Terah was greatly terrified in the king's presence. And he said to the king, it was Haran, my eldest son, who advised me to this. And Haran was in those days that Abram was born, 32 years old. But Haran did not advise his father to anything, for Terah said this to the king in order to deliver his soul from the king, for he feared greatly. And the king said to Terah, Haran, thy son who advised thee to this shall die through fire with Abram, for the sentence of death is upon him for having rebelled against the king's desire in doing this thing. And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abram, but he kept it within himself. And Haran said in his heart, behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things which Abram did. And it shall come to pass that if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevail, I will go after the king. And when Terah had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram. Man, they coming after them boys, man. They coming after them boys. For knowing what it is and what it ain't. And Haran at that time, and when Terah had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram, and they brought them both, Abram and Haran his brother, and to cast them into the fire. And all the inhabitants of the land, and the king's servants and princes, and all the women, and the little ones were there, standing that day over them. And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes, excepting their lower garments, which were upon them. And they bound their hands and feet with linen cords. And the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them both into the furnace. And the Lord loved Abram, and he had compassion over him. And the Lord came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords with which they bound him were burned, while Abram remained and walked about the fire. Abram pulled a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in that thing. Let me get this yellow, I guess. My bad, I want to highlight that. That's an important thing for me. They kindled the fire 3 days and 3 nights. That's what I should have marked. My bad. My bad. I'm going back to mark what I should have marked. I should have marked it. There we go. He commanded the servants that they should prepare the fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace, that is, and cast them. Then the king's servants took Abram and the brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes. They bound their hands. There we go. 22. But the Lord loved Abram. That's my boy. The Lord did Abram like Job. Yeah, like Job. That's my boy. Like the 3 holy children. Let me see. Just like the 3 holy children. All right. And Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burned to ashes. For his heart was not perfect with the Lord, and those men who cast him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over them, and they were burned, and 12 men of them died. And Abram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights, and all the servants of the king saw him. And they came and told the king, saying, Behold, we have seen Abram walking about in the midst of the fire, and even the lower garments which are upon him are not burned, but the cord with which he was bound is burned. And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted, and he would not believe them. So he sent other faithful princes to see this matter. And they went and saw it, and told it to the king. And the king rose to go and see it. And he saw Abram walking to and fro in the midst of the fire, and he saw Haran's body burned. And the king was wondered greatly. And the king ordered Abram to be taken out from the fire. And his servants approached to take him out, and they could not, for the fire was round about, and the flame ascending toward them from the furnace. And the king's servants fled from it. And the king rebuked them, saying, Make haste and bring Abram out of the fire, that you shall not die. Oh, now we're going to die. Now it's on us. And the servants of the king again approached to bring Abram out. And the flames came upon them and burned their faces so that 8 of them died. So that's 20 right there. 12 died before, 8 more, that's 20. And when the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire lest they should be burned, the king called to Abram, O servant of the God who is in heaven, go forth from amidst the fire and come hither before me. And Abram hearkened to the voice of the king. And he went forth from the fire and came and stood before the king. And when Abram came out, the king and all his servants saw Abram coming before the king with his lower garments upon him, for they were not burned, but the cord with which he was bound was burned. And the king said to Abram, How is it that thou was not burned in the fire? And Abram said to the king, The God of heaven and earth, in whom I trust, and who has all in his power, he delivered me from the fire into which thou didst cast me. And Haran, the brother of Abram, was burned to ashes, and they sought for his body, and they found it consumed. And Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire of Casdim. And the king, princes, and inhabitants of the land, seeing that Abram was delivered from the fire, they came and bowed down to Abram. And Abram said to them, Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the God of the world who made you, and serve him, and go in his ways. For it is he who delivered me from out of this fire, and it is he who created the souls and spirits of all men, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into the world. And it is he who will deliver those who trust in him for all pain. And this thing seemed very wonderful in the eyes of the king and princes, that Abram was saved from the fire and that Haran was burned. And the king gave Abram many presents. And he gave him his 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of one was Oni, and the name of the other Eleazar. Yeah, man, we can blow up the trumpet, man. We'll blow up the trumpet again for Abram saying, man, don't bow down to me. Bow down to the God of heaven. To the God of heaven, Blake. The maker of all. And all the kings, princes, and servants gave Abram many gifts of silver and gold and pearl. And the king and his princes sent him away, and he went in peace. And Abram went forth from the king in peace, and many of the king's servants followed him, and about 300 men joined him. And Abram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him. And Abram served the Lord his God all the days of his life. And he walked in his ways and followed his law. That's the do's and the don't right there. That is the do, the do. Abram served the Lord his God all the days of his life. And he walked in his ways and followed his law. The do's, the do's. Do what you're supposed to do. And from that day forward, Abram inclined the hearts of the sons of men to serve the Lord. Abram married Sarai. And at that time, Nahor and Abram took unto themselves wives, the daughters of their brother Haran. The wife of Nahor was Milcah, and the name of Abram's wife was Sarai. And Sarai, wife of Abram, was barren. She had no offspring in those days. Nimrod seeks to kill Abram. Oh, you back on that humbug, Nimrod, huh? And at the expiration of 2 years from Abram's going out of the fire, that is in the 52nd year of his life, behold, King Nimrod sat in Babel upon the throne, and the king fell asleep and dreamed that he was standing with his troops in the host in the valley opposite of the king's furnace. And he lifted up his eyes and saw a man in the likeness of Abram coming forth from the furnace, and that he came and stood before the king with his drawn sword. and then sprang to the king with his sword. When the king fled from the man, for he was afraid, and while he was running, the man threw an egg upon the king's head, and the egg became a great river. And the king dreamed that all his troops sank in that river and died. And the king took flight with 3 men who were before him, and he escaped. And the king looked at these men, and they were clothed in princely dresses as the garments of kings, and had the appearance of majesty of kings. And while they were running, the river again turned to an egg before the king. And there came forth from the egg a young bird, which came before the king, and flew at his head, and plucked out the king's eyes. Must be a vulture. And the king was grieved at the sight, and he awoke out of his sleep, and his spirit was agitated, and he felt a great terror. And in the morning, the king rose from his couch in fear, and he ordered all the wise men and magicians to come before him. When the kings related his dream to them, and the wise servant of the king, whose name was Anuki, let me mark that, Anuki. What up, Anuki? What's up, baby? Tell me what's going down. Anuki answered the king, saying, this is nothing else but the evil of Abram and his seed, which will spring up against my lord and the king in the latter days. And the days, behold, the days will come when Abram and his seed and the children of his household will war with the king, and they will smite the king's host and his troops. And as to what thou hast said concerning 3 men, which thou didst see like unto thyself, and which did escape, this means that only thou wilt escape with 3 kings from the kings of the earth, who will be with thee in battle. And that which thou sawest of the river, which turned to an egg at the first, and the young bird plucking out thine eyes, this means nothing else but that the seed of Abram which will slay the king in latter days. And this is the king's dream, and this is its interpretation. And the dream is true, and the interpretation which thy servant has given thee is right. Now therefore, my king, surely thou knowest that it is now 52 years since thy sages saw this, and at the birth of Abram. And if my king will suffer Abram to live in the earth, it will be to the injury of my lord and king. For all the days that Abram liveth, neither thou nor thy kingdom will be established. For this was known formerly at his birth. And why will not my king slay him, that this evil may be kept from thee in latter days? Man, that's crazy, man. What's good for one is evil for the other. What's good for you and blessings for you can be curses and evil for the other. And Nimrod hearkened to the voice of Anuki, and he sent some of his servants in secret to go and seize Abram and bring him before the king to suffer death. And Eleazar, Abram's servant, whom the king had given him, was at that time in the presence of the king. And he heard what Anuki had advised the king, and what the king had said to cause Abram's death. And Eleazar said to Abram, hasten, rise up, and save thy soul, that thou mayest not die through the hands of the king. For thus did he see in a dream concerning thee, and thus did Anuki interpret it, and thus also did Anuki advise the king concerning thee. Excuse me. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Eleazar, and Abram hastened and ran for safety to the house of Noah and his son Shem, and he concealed himself there and found a place of safety. And the king's servants came to Abram's house to seek him, but they could not find him. And they searched throughout the country, and he was not to be found. And they went and searched in every direction, and he was not to be met with. And when the king's servant could not find Abram, they returned to the king. But the king's anger against Abram was stilled, as they did not find him. And the king drove from his mind this matter concerning Abram. And Abram was concealed in Noah's house for 1 month, until the king had forgotten this matter. But Abram was still afraid of the king. And Terah came to see Abram, his son, secretly in the house of Noah. And terror was very great in the eyes of the king. And Abram said to his father, dost thou not know that the king thinketh to slay me, and to annihilate my name from the earth by the advice of his wicked counselors? Now whom hast thou here? And what hast thou in this land? Arise, let us go together to the land of Canaan, that we may be delivered from his hand. Lest thou perish also through him in this latter days. Dost thou not know, and hast thou not heard, that it is not through love that Nimrod giveth thee all these honor, but it is only for his benefit that he bestoweth all this good upon thee? And if he do unto thee greater good than this, surely these are only vanities in the world. For wealth and riches cannot avail in the day of wrath and anger. Now therefore hearken to my voice, and let us arise and go to the land of Canaan, out of the reach of injury from Nimrod, and serve thou the Lord who created thee in the earth, and it will be well with thee, and cast away all the vain things which thou pursuest. And Abram ceased to speak with Noah, when Noah and his son Shem answered Terah, saying, true is the word which Abram hath said unto thee. And Terah hearkened to the voice of his son Abram. And Terah did all that Abram said, for this was from the Lord, that the king should not cause Abram's death. Chapter 13. Abram in Canaan. Abram went on a road trip. Abram and his daddy went on a road trip. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran. Maybe that's why he had such a, like in the Bible, when you read about Abraham and Lot, maybe that's why he took such a man, what about Lot? What about Lot? Lot's in Sodom. What about Lot? Maybe it's because of what his daddy did to his brother, and he was looking out for Lot. Or maybe it's because of how him and Lot went to Canaan, what we're about to read, and him and Lot became, Ace Boone Coon's cousins. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, or Lot his nephew, my bad, Lot was his nephew, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, the wife of his son Abram, and all the souls of his household, and went with them from cast them to go to the land of Canaan. And when they came as far as the land of Haran, they remained there, for it was exceedingly good land for pasture, and of a sufficient extent for those who accompanied them. And the people of the land of Haran saw that Abram was good and upright with God and men, and that the Lord his God was with him. And some of the people of the land of Haran came and joined Abram, and he taught them the instructions of the Lord and his ways. And these men remained with Abram in his house, and they adhered to him. And Abram remained in the land 3 years, and at the expiration of 3 years, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am the Lord who brought thee forth from Kasdim, and delivered thee from the hands of all thine enemies. And now, therefore, if thou wilt hearken to my voice and keep my commandments, my statutes, and my laws, then will I cause thine enemies to fall before thee, and I will multiply thy seed like the stars of heaven, and I will send my blessing upon all the works of thy hands, and thou shalt lack nothing. Pooh-wee. As if you do what you're supposed to do. The Most High gonna bless Abram. Arise now, take thy wife and all belonging to thee, and go to the land of Canaan and remain there. And hold on, let me see. What you doing up in there, cabbage? Cabbage! Check on my dog. Arise now. Take thy wife and all belonging to thee, and go to the land of Canaan and remain there. And I will there be unto thee for a God, and I will bless thee. And Abram rose and took his wife and all belonging to him, and he went to the land of Canaan as the Lord had told him. And Abram was 55 years old when he went from Haran. And Abram came to the land of Canaan and dwelt there in the midst of the city. And he there pitched his tent amongst the children of Canaan, inhabitants of the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram when he came to the land of Canaan and said to him, This is the land which I gave unto thee and to thy seed after thee forever. And I will make thy seed like the stars of heaven, and I will give unto thy seed for an inheritance all the lands which thou seest. And Abraham built an altar in the place where God had spoken to him. And Abraham called upon the name of the Lord. Noah died. And at that time, at the end of 3 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, in that year Noah died, which was the 58th year of the life of Abram. And all the days of Noah lived were 950 years, and he died. And Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, he, his wife, and all belonging to him, and all those that accompanied him, together with those that joined him from the people of the land, but Nahor, Abram's brother, and Terah, his father, and Lot, the son of Haran, and all belonging to them dwelt in Haran. Okay, so when Abram left, everybody else stayed. Sodom and Gomorrah revolt. In the 50th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and all the cities of the plain revolted from the power of Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, for all the kings of the cities of the plain had served Chedorlaomer for 12 years and given him a yearly tax. But in those days, in the 13th year, they rebelled against him. Elam conquers Babel. And in the 10th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, there was war between Nimrod, king of Shinar, and Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam. And Nimrod came to fight with Chedorlaomer and subdue him. For Chedorlaomer was at that time one of the princes of the host of Nimrod. And when all the people of the tower were dispersed, and those that remained were also scattered upon the face of the earth, Chedorlaomer went to the land of Elam and reigned over it and rebelled against the Lord. And in those days, when Nimrod saw that the cities of the plain had rebelled, he came with pride and anger to war with Chedorlaomer. And Nimrod assembled all his princes and subjects, about 700,000 men, and went against Chedorlaomer. And Chedorlaomer went out to meet him with 5,000 men. And they prepared for battle in the valley of Babel, which is between Elam and Shinar. And all those kings fought there. And Nimrod and his people were smitten before the people of Chedorlaomer. And there fell from Nimrod's men about 600,000. And Mordon, the king's son, fell amongst them. Damn, 600,000 fell from 5,000. And Nimrod fled and returned in shame and disgrace to his land. And he was under subjection to Chedorlaomer for a long time. And Chedorlaomer returned to his land and sent princes of his host to the kings that dwelt around him, to Arioch, king of Elasar, and to Tidal, king of Goyim, and made a covenant with them. And they were all obedient to his commands. 130-year prophecy given. And it was in the 50th year of the 15th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 70th year of the life of Abram. And the Lord appeared to Abram in that year, and he said to him, I am the Lord who brought thee out of the land of Ur-Kasdim, to give thee this land for an inheritance. Now therefore walk before me and be perfect and keep my commandments. For to thee and to thy seed I will give this land for an inheritance, from the river Mizraim unto the great river Euphrates. And thou shalt come to thy fathers in peace and in good age. And the fourth generation shall return here to this land and shall inherit it forever. And Abram built an altar, and he called upon the name of the Lord who appeared to him. And he brought up sacrifices upon the altar of the Lord. Abram moved back to Haran. And at that time, Abram returned and went to Haran to see his father and mother and his father's household. And Abram and his wife and all belonging to him returned to Haran. And Abram dwelt in Haran 5 years. And many of the people of Haran, 72 men, followed Abram, and Abram taught them the instruction of the Lord and his ways. And he taught them to know the Lord. Abram returns to Canaan at age 75. In those days, the Lord appeared to Abram in Haran, and he said to him, Behold, I spoke unto thee these 20 years back, saying, Go forth from thy land, from thy birthplace, and from thy father's house, to the land which I have shown thee to give it to thee and thy children. For there, in that land will I bless thee, and make thee a great nation, and make thy name great, and in thee shall the families of the earth be blessed. Now therefore, arise, go forth from this place, thou, thy wife, and all belonging to thee, also everyone born in thy house, and all the souls that thou hast made in Haran, and bring them out with thee from there, and rise to return to the land of Canaan. And Abram arose and took his wife Sarai and all belonging to him, and all that was born to him in his house, and the souls which they had made in Haran. And they came out to go to the land of Canaan. And Abram went and returned to the land of Canaan according to the word of the Lord. And Lot his brother, the son of his brother Haran, went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he went forth from Haran to return to the land of Canaan. And he came to the land of Canaan according to the word of the Lord to Abram. And he pitched his tent, and he dwelt in the plain of Mamre. And with him was Lot his brother's son, and all belonging to him. And the Lord again appeared to Abram and said, To thy seed will I give this land. And he there built an altar to the Lord who appeared to him, which is still in this day in the plains of Mamre. Chapter 14. Yes, cabbage is in the dogland. Chapter 14. Pharaoh Rikayon. And in those days, there was in the land of Shinar a wise man who had understanding in all wisdom, and of a beautiful appearance. But he was poor and indigent. His name was Rikayon. And he was hard set to support himself. And he resolved to go to Egypt, to Osrasis, the son of Anam, king of Egypt. Oswarsis, that's a name. The son of Anam, king of Egypt, to show the king his wisdom, for perhaps he might find grace in his sight to raise him up and give him maintenance. And Rikayon did so. And when Rechaim came to Egypt, he asked the inhabitants of Egypt concerning the king. And the inhabitants of Egypt told him the custom of the king of Egypt. For it was that the custom of the king of Egypt, that he went from his royal palace and was seen abroad only one day in the year. And after that, the king will return to his palace to remain there. And on the day when the king went forth, he passed judgment in the land. And everyone having a suit came before the king that day to obtain his request. And when Rechaim heard of the custom of the king, and that he could not come into the presence of the king, he grieved greatly and was very sorrowful. And in the evening, Rechaim went out and found the house in ruins, formerly a bakehouse in Egypt. And he abode there all night in bitterness of soul, and pitched in with hunger, and sleep was removed from his eyes. Rechaim considered within himself what he should do in the town until the king made his appearance, and how he might maintain himself there. And he rose in the morning and walked about, and met in his way those who sold vegetables and various sorts of seeds, with which they supplied the inhabitants. And Rechaim wished to do the same in order to get a maintenance in the city. But he was unacquainted with the custom of the people, and he was like a blind man among them. And he went and obtained vegetables to sell them for his support. And the rabble assembled about him, and ridiculed him, and took his vegetables from him, and left him nothing. And he rose up from there in bitterness of soul, and went sighing to the bakehouse, in which he had remained all that night before. And he slept there the second night. And on that night again he reasoned within himself. Now he could save himself from starvation, and he devised a scheme of how he could save himself from starvation. And he devised a scheme how to act. And he rose up in the morning and acted ingeniously, and went and hired 30 strong men of the rabble, carrying their war instruments in their hands, and they led them to the top of the Egyptian sepulchre, and he placed them there. And he commanded them, saying, Thus saith the king, strengthen yourselves and be valiant men, and let no man be buried until 200 pieces of silver be given, and then he may be buried. And those men did according to the order of Rechaim to the people of Egypt the whole of that year. And in 8 months' time, Rechaim and his men gathered great riches of silver and gold, and Rechaim took the great quantity of horses and other animals, and he hired more men, and he gave them horses, and they remained with him. And when the year came round, and at the time when the king went forth into the town, all the inhabitants of Egypt assembled together to speak to him concerning the work of Rechaim and his men. And the king went forth on the appointed day, and all the Egyptians came before him and cried unto him, saying, May the king live forever. May the king live forever. What is this thing thou doest in the town of thy servants? Not to suffer a dead body to be buried until so much silver and gold be given. And was there ever the like unto this done in the whole earth? For the days of former kings, yea, even the former in the days of Adam, that unto this day, that the dead should not be buried only for a set price. And we know it to be the custom of kings to take a yearly tax from the living. But thou dost not only do this, but from the dead also thou exactest a tax day by day. Now, O king, we can no more bear this, for the whole city is ruined on this account, and dost thou not know it? And when the king heard all that they had spoken, he was very wroth, and his anger burned within him at this affair, for he had known nothing of it. And the king said, Who and where is he that dares to do this wicked thing in my land without my command? Surely you will tell me. And they told him all the works of Rechaim and his men. And the king's anger was aroused, and he ordered Rechaim and his men to be brought before him. And Rechion took about 1,000 children, sons and daughters, and clothed them in silk and embroidery. And he set them upon the horses and set the king by means of his men. And he also took a great quantity of silver and gold and precious stones, and a strong and beautiful horse as a present for the king, with which he came before the king and bowed down to the earth before him. And the king, excuse me, and the king and his servants and all the inhabitants of Egypt wondered at the work of Rechion, and they saw his riches and the present that he had brought to the king, and it greatly pleased the king, and he wondered at it. And when Rechion sat before him, the king asked him concerning all his works, and Rechion spoke all his words wisely before the king, his servants, and all the inhabitants of Egypt. And when the king heard the words of Rechion and his wisdom, Rechion found grace in his sight. And he went with grace and kindness from all the servants of the king, and from the inhabitants of Egypt, on account of his wisdom and excellent speeches. And from that time they loved him exceedingly. And the king answered and said to Rechion, Thy name shall no more be called Rechion, but Pharaoh shalt be thy name. Rechion, the first Pharaoh. Rechion, the first Pharaoh. Says, thou didst exact a tax from the dead, and he called his name Pharaoh. I'm going to put the first Pharaoh by that. The first Pharaoh. Rechion. And the king and his subjects loved Rechion for his wisdom, and they consulted with all the inhabitants of Egypt to make him perfect under the king. And all the inhabitants of Pharaoh and its wise men did so, and it was made a law in Egypt. And they made Rechion Pharaoh perfect under Oswiris, king of Egypt. And Rechion Pharaoh governed over Egypt daily, administering justice to the whole city. But Oswiris, the king, would judge the people of the land one day in the year. And when he went out to make his appearance, the Egyptian dynasty begins. And Rechion Pharaoh cunningly usurped the government of Egypt. I bet he did. And he exacted a tax from all the inhabitants of Egypt. And all the inhabitants of Egypt greatly loved the Rechion Pharaoh. And they made a decree to call every king that should reign over them and their seed in Egypt Pharaoh. Therefore, all the kings that reigned in Egypt from that time forward were called Pharaoh unto this day. And we're going to stop there. That was chapter 12 through chapter 14. We stopped on chapter 15, Abram in Egypt, the famine. Man, Abram in Egypt. Man, I wonder if this is the same story. You see these things, look at how, if we look at it, look at how the stories are happening multiple times. Okay, we got the flood. You had a flood that happened twice. You had the first flood when the Gihon waters rose up. And then you had Abram getting put in the fire, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And now you have in chapter 15 what looks like a famine that's going to be in the land. So Abram's going to have to go to Egypt because of the famine. So man, hey, we got some dualities or some similarities, I should say, similarities. But it is what it is. We have finished it for the day, and the objective once again is to see what it is and what it ain't. What it is and what it ain't, what we can and what we can't. So, shalom, everybody. I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Shalom.